Welcome back to the Women in Movement podcast. We're here with Suzanne-Michelle, who is a performing artist who teaches various classes all over New York City. Suzanne-Michelle, would you like to add to that intro?
That's a great intro. Thank you very much, Teresa. Yes, I just moved back to New York about 3 years ago, and I've been teaching mostly at Incredible in Brooklyn. I also have taught at various other studios, Body and Pole, Everybody's Nimble, etc. And I work at CrossFit South Brooklyn teaching hand balancing in addition.
Nice. So can you walk us through baby Suzanne-Michelle and your early movement experiences or life experiences?
Yes, I climbed a lot of trees and made a lot of mud pies, for sure. I guess when I was a kid, I definitely took like a smattering of dance classes, but it was never something that I could be like, yes, I was a dancer as a kid. I was not. I think most of my movement existed within whatever various sport activity my mom had decided that I could join that month. I did everything from soccer to basketball to, I think karate was the one that stuck for the longest time.
Nice.
All the things. I did a lot of rollerblading because, 90s. But as an adult, and I'm a musician, so as an adult, I went to school for songwriting and vocal performance. And I think that is when everybody asks me, like, what's your movement background? The first thing that I think of is music as opposed to actual movement, because that was the thing that made me want to move. That was where everything started for me with music.
That's the driver.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of movement that happens when you are creating music too.
Yeah. I think a big part of what made, because pole dancing was the thing that I found that really pulled me into movement for many reasons. But I think the thing that made movement so important was I had spent so much time being unhappy and not moving, because when you're writing a song, you're sitting in a chair and you're just staring at a piece of paper. And when you're singing, you're using a lot of muscles, but they're really small and they're inside of you, and there's not a lot of big bodily movement. So I didn't move a lot. And when I discovered that I could take movement and put it together with music, I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. This is like a full body experience as opposed to just like within my vocal cords. So yeah.
I think a lot of polers also have something else that's a huge driver in their life too. So it's cool to be able to combine your creativity in both ways. When you see your reels or stories, there definitely is a huge music component to the expression that comes out in your body. And it's nice to see. And
thanks.
Yeah. Also, you spoke about the tiny little muscles in your body that kind of move when you're doing these vocal practices. Is there any similarities you see between that and your pole movement?
I don't know between that and my pole movement, but between the way that adults approach learning, there's especially since I'm a vocal coach as well as a pole instructor and balance instructor. I work with adults and kids alike in different ways that they use their muscles. And something that's really interesting to me is the concept of kids, especially in this country, are told like they have it or they don't when it comes to singing. It's a really interesting way to look at it. And I'm always approaching it from the mindset of you have a set of muscles, and if you're 10, they're not that strong. And even if you're 30, if you haven't used them at all, they're still not that strong. So it just depends on how much time you want to put into it and what drives you, but I think that in the same way that you can pick up pole dancing at age 25 or start hand balancing at age 65, you can start singing at any age as well. It's very similar because it's all muscular. So learning how to control your muscles applies to both singing and movement. And additionally, just like a side note on that one, because it is something I'm passionate about explaining to people, is if you go into your first guitar lesson and then you leave and you go, okay, cool, I learned something. You don't go home and then your whole family goes, oh, cool, play us a song.
Right.
they're like, oh, that's great that you're learning this skill. But if you tell somebody that you've been singing, they're like, sing me a song. And like, if you can't do it right then and there, then, and it's interesting the way that we interpret which particular set of like musculature movement skill is like supposed to just already exist as a talent versus something that, something that you can get better at.
Yeah, and be trained. That's so interesting. Maybe I'll have to take some vocal lessons from you at 34 years old.
Hey, you know, I shout out to Jackie. I have a few of pole people and movement people that have ended up taking voice lessons for me.
That's so really cool. Fun. I think too, it's something that as humans, like, it's interesting to also just work on our sound in the way that it comes out of our body without the stigma that's like, oh, this person's walking down the street doing these weird sounds. Like, our sound must make sense in a word somehow, instead of just walking down the street making sounds that exercise those muscles that don't get exercised as often.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pieces to vocals that people generally don't think about, like the rhythm of speech, or the way your voice goes up and down when you talk, or your projection and your quiet and your dynamics are all vocal dynamics, and they're all supported by muscles. And if you can understand those vocal dynamics as a singer, when you're dancing, you can hear those vocal dynamics in a piano player. So like say I'm dancing to Moonlight Sonata, and it's a particular pianist that I connect with. There's going to be moments when they're louder or softer, moments when they're like more like a staccato or more flowy, and that's what my body's going to do. So it's all an imitation of, it's my movement is imitating their movement because they are moving on the piano. It's actually, I mean, they call those pieces movements for a reason. So yeah, all connects.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I'm sure it also evokes a different somatic response in the body too, having different pitches or tones or rhythm of voice.
Totally. I mean, expansion, contraction, and dance, right? Like when you hear like this very joyful sound, you want to open, like you want to just open your body. And then if you hear this like sad type of sound, you're gonna like close off, or you might like slam the ground with your fists or open your fingers, or like there's just like very expressive, intense movements that go with expressive, intense sounds, and the same thing, soft and quiet movements going with soft and quiet sounds. And yes, music is the thing that fuels all of my movement, if you haven't figured it out yet.
Well, it is like one of our biggest drivers too in responses, like our ability to have these rhythms that are from hearing as opposed to rhythms and vision. Just like our body responds to much better and faster. Yeah. So it's like, that's one of our first, I think it's one of the first systems that's developed in embryo, is like your vestibular canals. And yeah, so it's important. I think like the way that we really used to work as a human species is we would hear something and then bring our eyes to it, as opposed to like seeing something and then, trying to hear it.
So interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like hearing is always the first thing for me. Like I'm on the spectrum and whatever that means, it means for whomever. But I consider all of my sensory items to be within that realm. And one of those things is when I hear sound, it's kind of like my brain is a tape recorder, and I'm old. It records snippets. So if, for example, if you were to say something to me, I might not hear it right away because maybe I'm distracted or something, but I will be like, I don't remember what she said, but I can play back the exact tone. I could actually like say out loud the exact tone, every note that your voice made while you were saying that sentence. And then I can find the words in that like soundbite. And it's wild because I just thought everybody did it. And it was like, I think the last year I asked a few friends, like music friends, and they were like, no, I don't do that. That's a you thing. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I just assumed this is like a sound-oriented people do this. So sound is like, for me, it's the first thing I go to, which is why I was so surprised that I was not an auditory learner. Definitely a visual learner. And I do think that it's helped me understand my students a lot better too, to know that like everybody is completely unique. And just because you might be a very musical person or a very, very active person, physical person, your type of learning, it does not always match up with your strongest sensory responses.
Yeah. That might be like your flow state area. And then
Yeah.
your learning area
Yeah, totally.
has to be something that like actually makes you challenge your brain or put it in a different state.
Yeah.
I guess. That's funny to think about. So let's talk about your first, getting into pole let's talk about pole. Your
Sure,
first
let's do it.
early Suzanne pole journey.
Somebody invited me to a show that they were in, and I was like, "Are you a stripper?" And she was like, "No, just come to my show." And it was pole-esque. I can never remember what year. I feel like it might have been, I don't know. I mean, I've been dancing for like 15 years, so whatever that math is. But it was Roz was performing her Dirty Diana routine. Shout out to Roz.
Nice. She was just on.
And yeah, I know. I love her so much. And I was heavier at the time. And as I told you, not moving because I was doing all that songwriting and I was just constantly sitting still. And I was like, I just saw this plus size human rocking movement. And I was like, oh, maybe I could also move my body. And I was like, I wonder what that would feel like. That looks like something I could do. And there was music involved, which was great because I had moved to New York and I was, early 20s and I was surrounded by a lot of musicians that were considered to be like the best of the best at the time. And they were toxic. And I wasn't included in a lot of things, not because of now that I'm an adult, I know, not because of my skill level, but because of my social hierarchy. I wasn't high up on the social food chain. So a lot of social trauma involved there. And so I was like looking for an outlet without knowing I was looking for one. And I, at that show, saw her perform, went to my first class back in the day at the Body and Pole that was like one singular room and was like, well, I love this. This is great. Let's do this. And I lost a bunch of weight because I was like actually moving and I was like, what is healthy eating? I started eating like not just really unhealthy food, but like some other things and just like opened my whole world up. My life trajectory changed. It's like a big moment for me. Because I broke up with the guy that I was dating at the time because he was not great. Moved into my own apartment in New York, decided I needed to start over a little bit bigger. So I went home to Massachusetts, thought I was going to come right back. And then I didn't. Things took off. I went back to school for personal training and like learned how my anatomy worked and started teaching pole back home. And then my music career took off back home as well. And I ended up just in Massachusetts for a while.
What was the studio in Massachusetts?
Various ones. I actually started teaching at a place called Super Shag. Shout out to Danielle Mazes, who started or was one of the people, and Patty, where they started a program at a ballroom dance studio.
Okay.
Was it Charlestown, Massachusetts, in Boston, and I taught there, and that's actually when I started ballroom dance. Started doing ballroom dance as well. That was fun, and then I went on from there. I taught at, I've taught at so many studios. There's Circus Complex. I taught Lyra Hoop and hand balancing there. Boston Pole Fitness. I taught some pole there a little bit. And Fly Together Fitness. I taught there right before I moved here, actually. But my main studio that I taught the most at was Sky High Studios in Marlborough, Massachusetts.
Nice.
That's like when I go home, that's the home studio.
Yeah, I think I've seen that studio.
Yeah, that's the one. That's where all my people are.
Nice. And then you came back to New York at some point.
Yeah, I actually got asked to work at Body and Pole by Kira, the owner of Body and Pole, and I was like, it's time. COVID is wrapping up a little bit. I don't want to be here in Massachusetts anymore. I never really did. I love my people, but not my state. And I decided to move back, and I worked there for a couple of years, and then I started working at Incredible. So I moved back because of pole. Everything pull this, pull that, pull everything.
It's pulled you in so many directions.
Yeah, it's wild.
That's so cool. And being in New York City, what are the adjustments you feel like you had to make as a teacher? Did you have to make any adjustments from Massachusetts to New York?
Yes, it's been an interesting, it also depends on studio to studio. So it's been an interesting journey because in Massachusetts, we had, especially at Sky High, there was a very specific training. Like, here are the moves for the level 1 class. And you can definitely do more than that or other things, but you have a backbone. And then here's the moves for level 2. They had check off sheets. They had ways that they could like track their progress. Going to work at Body and Pole was like, some weeks I would have 5 people from 5 different countries that were just visiting. And some of them might be that level of class. Some of them might be too high or too low of a level to be in the class because they're just traveling and trying to like
get a class in.
Yeah. So I had to adapt to lots of unexpected. And the popularity of particular movements and the namings of particular movements are different here. Things that everybody else like asked for back home, people here are like, please don't make me do that, and vice versa. So that was interesting as well. Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, it was weird.
Okay, back to my. Yeah, I can see how, especially in New York City, there's just so many variables within personality, person, language. It's a lot there's a lot that you learn as an instructor in New York City. Totally. Teaching to people that don't speak any English and having it be like multiple people, one from maybe Italy and one from like a Spanish speaking country or like, a French speaking country, whatever. They're like, it's just like, okay, I know 4 words in this language and 3 words in that language. And so we're just going to teach with our body today. Yeah.
See how this goes. And it's great. I like, if you know me well enough, you know that I have a very weird obsession with Rubik's Cubes, which actually occurred in my 30s. It wasn't like an early life thing. It was just, I was like, oh, this is a metaphor for everything that I enjoy in life. Because I really love to figure out how people tick. It's like my go-to activity. I'm like, how does your brain work? Let me find out how I can help you learn with your brain.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite parts of pole and of handstands as well. Has been really interesting to see how people's brains react to movement.
Yeah. That's the number one thing as a coach is, can you find that in the person that makes them trust you and it makes them come back, because you do know what motivates them or how to properly motivate them with a certain amount of feedback that is helpful, but also encouraging. You don't want to give too much of either. It's that balance. But yeah, that's the biggest part of being a coach is finding that tick. I like the Rubik's Cube analogy. It's funny.
Yeah, I rarely do, I say this a lot, do adult students make new mistakes. I very rarely see a mistake that I haven't already seen, which entertains me to no end, because to see people that are completely different in every way, age, gender, or lack thereof, ethnicity, whatever, body type, make exactly the same physical mistakes when they're trying to learn a move.
That's scary.
It's hilarious. Yeah. It's hilarious. It's just because we're all human. And I think one of my favorite things is when somebody makes a new mistake, because I will laugh out loud and then say, okay, I'm so sorry. I'm not laughing at you. Let me tell you what's going on inside of my brain. I've never seen anybody do that before. And it's just so great.
You're like, what in your life led you to that movement pattern?
It's great. And like, yeah, it's very fun.
That's cool. It's cool. So you also touched briefly on your upside down classes.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about that journey?
Sure. Yeah. When I was in Massachusetts, one of my best friends, Felicia Sun, she's a fellow queer pole dancing human and a neurosurgeon.
Wow.
Yeah, she blows my mind. But she was doing hand balancing at the gym, and we were so weird. We'd go to the gym together and we'd like call like our bodies our body. Like, our body is hungry. Our body is this. We had a fun time. But one of the things she liked to do is handstands, and I was inspired by that more so because at the time I had injured my shoulder from pole, and I actually had a couple of years where I just like couldn't pull because I didn't know what I was doing. I needed to learn more about my body. I hadn't done that yet. But during those few years, I did a lot of hand balancing because it was really good rehab for my shoulder.
Right.
I didn't understand that that's why I was gravitating towards it at the time. But in hindsight, it's just working on an opposing action of all the things that were injuring my shoulder. So That makes total sense. but yeah, I did that with her at the gym, and that was like one of the things that we did.
Nice.
And that's how it started.
Yeah.
It was just a hobby.
Yeah.
And I just kept doing it. And then I started to like more physically understand it. And I was like, oh, isn't it funny that, when I do this with my arm, like this happens with my leg. And I just kept keeping on. And then when you get enough, at least for me, enough information on a thing, you want to share that information because we're wired to be social. So
yeah,
I was like, well, how can I share this with more people? And I can't even remember. I guess it was probably Sky High. It was probably my first handstand teaching class, I think. I can't even remember when I started, like how I started teaching handstands exactly.
Okay.
But it just kind of happened. I might have subbed a class or something and loved it.
Yeah.
But that's the background of how I got into hand balancing. It was just and now it's just super fun.
No, I think it's really cool that is your background, because I find that a lot of times individuals are into hand balancing because they did gymnastics or they have this thing that they were already taught to do, like an acrobatics class. But the fact that you were the person who just did the like figure it out, just mess around and figure it out, it also speaks volumes to that method and the idea that you can learn so much through your mistakes or just the playing with the things that also help you to become a good teacher,
I'd say my methodology in teaching has always been try to understand a thing, whether it be with my own body or with my brain. Because every now and then, hey, listen, if you're a good instructor, you can teach a thing you can't do. It's possible. You just have to actually know, number one, how to keep them safe, spot them. And you have to really understand the movement by having watched it and broken it down and talk to other people about it. So sometimes there's things that I don't necessarily do, but teach. It's more rare because you want to teach the things you like, the things you want to show people, that stuff that you learned.
Yeah.
But I find that my methodology in teaching has always been to fully understand a movement and then also to try to fully understand each different type of brain that's in the room and try to find a way to explain that movement to that brain. And I'd say that if you don't want any individual attention, don't take my class. Because you get a lot of it. Some people don't. They just want to be left alone in the corner and they want to just do the thing.
No, I appreciate that you go around and help individuals again with that one-on-one attention, because certain people need specific cues.
Yeah.
And not to worry about the other cues that might be overload of information. Like you're like, you kind of like need to try it first and then get the cue that's going to help you or whatever it is. Yeah. And another area that it seems like, you could correct me, but that you kind of play with more so is the straps.
Oh, the pole straps.
Yeah. The pole straps. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I had been watching them on the internet, thought it was interesting, and Sharon and Incredible just was like, hey, does someone want to teach straps? And I was like, yes. And I was like, I guess it's time for me to learn how to use my full strap. And because I had done straps, like actual circus straps.
Yeah, okay.
I've done every apparatus. The only one that I don't, and shout out to all of you who love it. I think you're great. It's probably lovely. Silks, I've tried. And I'm not saying I haven't enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. But when I'm done, I'm so tired. I'm so tired and I tied so many knots and it took me so long to get there. Anyways, I've tried all the apparatuses and straps was one of the ones that I love the most. So when I was like, I could combine it with pole, awesome. And I kind of classic instructor behavior is have a deadline as to when you need to teach somebody else how to do a thing and thoroughly learn how to do that thing. So it was very helpful to have someone be like, hey, learn this. And I was like, okay, cool. Because I already knew how to use straps, but not on the pole. So I started exploring with that. And that was a wild ride because there's this part of me that I had somebody say once that they didn't want a pole dancer they wanted an aerialist, not just a pole dancer. And it really pissed me off. Because I was like, hold on a second. I am both of those things and sometimes I'm both of those things at the same time.
Yeah.
And so for straps, for me, I had a lot of moments back and forth where I was like, I want to bring in as much of my circus background into this as I can, but I don't want to detract from the movement vocabulary of pole because they are different. There's so much crossover as there is with any movement style, but there is a sensual level of movement in pole that doesn't usually exist or didn't usually exist in circus arts.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's like the sporty versus the sexy, if you're gonna like oversimplify it. So I was like, I want to do a little bit of everything. And when there's a new apparatus that everybody wants to learn and nobody even knows what they're getting into, it's like, I don't even know what level of people are coming into this class because it could be people that have been pole dancing for 10 years and are super strong, but have never done anything circus related. They don't know how to put their arm in a strap. They don't know how to attach it to the pole. They don't know how to make sure that their shoulders aren't getting pulled out of the socket. But then at the same time, I could have somebody who's been pole dancing for like a year or less, but they've done circus arts or gymnastics or something else, and they have like a strength background that. So I was like, okay, here we go. We're gonna see who shows up in class. And I had to have like 5 class plans because I needed to know, like, I was like, maybe they can do this and maybe they can't because they've never tried before. So it's really fun to figure that out. And now it's like it's taking off on the internet.
Yeah.
It's everywhere now.
Yeah.
I get a lot of requests to post more straps content. That happens a lot. And I have to say it's definitely been fun to think of all the different things I can attach the strap to now.
Yeah.
You can attach a hand strap to anything. Like scaffolding. I did that photo shoot with Renee recently and we attached it to the scaffolding.
Nice.
That was fun.
I attached mine to a playground at home. They redid my playground and I attached it to like 3 of the spinning things. And yeah, I was like messing around. It's fun.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a lot of fun.
Adult playground, literally and figuratively. Is the life I live.
I do think that the strap has like a very playground feel to it when you're on the pole. It's like, oh, and everyone who comes out of the class is usually feeling great, like smiling and feeling like they just flew, you're moving a lot faster too, because a spin pole is usually like, I've done it on static for sure, but I prefer it on spin. I think most people do. And when you're spinning your body around like that, you get a certain rush of I don't know, adrenaline. There's something and just kind of lifts your heart rate and makes you feel good, I think. Yeah. Well, I took my first straps class with you and I have to thank you because I love it. I use it weekly at least and just get to play and try to work on stretching and mobilizing through.
Was that the first one that we taught at Incredible?
Yeah. So
that was the day that I went in and it was like months.
Yeah. Maybe it was one of the first, it was the first like series that you did. Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I had been like practicing the sequences for months and I was like, let's see what happens. That was like that was that class series.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know if other people are going to love this as much as me. I don't even, because it's different when you're teaching straps at a circus space because people go there because they want to learn how to do straps. They've seen straps, they're like, this is great. But this apparatus, this hand strap being put on a pole was so new to the pole community that most people were just like, I don't know what this is. Let's try it.
Right.
And see what happens.
Right.
So it's interesting.
Yeah. And I think now it creates a lot of room for accessibility for individuals who might not have had that accessibility or even just like a muscle awareness so that eventually if you do become flexible enough or mobile enough in areas that like you can know what to get into it. Yeah.
Certain moves that allows it like lengthens your arm by a whole strap's length so that you can get into. Yeah.
Yeah. And now you teach those classes worldwide too.
Yeah. I taught some. I got actually asked to teach workshops in Reno for straps, and I was elated because the studio has to buy like 12 straps for their studio to have a workshop, and they were like, yeah, let's go. And then at the end of the workshop, everybody bought the straps.
Nice.
Because all the students were so excited about about straps, and that
Yeah.
felt so good to be like, yay, a new thing for everyone. Yay.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
it.
it's
I
fun.
love it. That's cool. Okay. So let's also go into your performing pieces. So you do some choreo, some freestyle. What do you like about performing? What do you find is like the difference between your choreo or your freestyle?
Performing is so I love to connect things together, like a string of a movement. And sometimes I'll become fixated until I finish a string of movement. And I don't even realize that I've started the string of movement, and I'll be doing it for months. And then I'm like, oh, I now have 2 minutes of a routine written that I didn't realize I had written. And then other times I really like a piece of music and I really just want to write a string of movement to it. And that takes longer because I have to take breaks, because you have to come up with things that are put into boxes. You have to have a movement that expands at this exact moment that the music expands and stops abruptly when the music stops abruptly. And I would say that when I'm writing a piece, that the latter, the writing to the actual music, is usually the way that I write, which you could call a very neurodivergent way to write, because most choreographers that I've come across will write a set of movements. They'll put on a song and then they'll move to the song and make the movements match up with the song. Whereas I usually put on a song and then add the movement. So it makes doing quick shows a lot more challenging, because I have to either do that, and it takes a long time, or I have to accept the fact that this piece is going to be written movement first, music second. And some shows, when they're like, this is the song you need to dance to, it's an even bigger challenge, because if you only have a month to write a piece to a particular song, and the easiest way to do that is to have your act, quote unquote, where you have a set of movements and then you take that set of movements and you apply it to the song. It's hard for me to do that when I'm like, yeah, but I already know which song it is. So I want to put the song on and I want to, work at the music. It's complex, and a lot of it depends on how much emotional and mental energy I have. Some days I don't have any. I'm pretty good at being like, today is not a day that I can write anything, so I'm just gonna go to a class at the gym and work out instead. Like, I always move, but having to accept that some days are just not good days to write is a challenge for sure.
Yeah, because that could make the day more frustrating if you can't get anything out that you want out.
Yeah, I used to have, I had such access during COVID. People are always talking about like their different experiences. And one of the greatest joys that I've had was during COVID, the studio was empty. And even before COVID, there were certain times of day when the studio was always empty. And I lived in Boston, and I would drive, it was an hour and a half to the studio.
Wow.
So I would get up at like 5:30 in the morning, and I'd drive into the studio. This is pre-COVID. And I would be there for 3 or 4 hours because nobody was there yet. So I would just dance or sit and stare at a wall, or like I choreographed. And then during quarantine, I had a similar access, but I lived closer to the studio at that point. So I spent even more time sitting on the floor and staring at a wall. But I always say I used to train for what I would say 6 hours a day, between the 3 hours that I'd spend at the dance studio, the 2 hours I'd spend at the gym, and the hour that I'd spend either like doing some other physical thing. I was just constantly training. And I found that the easiest way for my brain to compose choreography and write was to have no time constraints, which isn't really something that we get to deal with as adults very often. So I look back on that time with like a lot of joy. Yeah. It's like so nice that I got to have that time. I was still working full time, but I had access to a space and time, and I was near it. So it was like always right at my fingertips. I'm like, I could have walked to the studio at one point where I was living. So I was like, if it's a Tuesday, it's 2 p.m., nobody's at the studio. And I'm like, you know what? Actually, I think I want to go in there for an hour and write this piece of choreo to this music. I could do that. Nice. As you know, in New York, not as much of a thing.
No, yeah. It's also not, time is like, everyone's usually rushing. So it's like different vibes there too.
That's why I love the open pole practices, is because I know that if there's space, I can just be there for a giant chunk. And I just want to move and take things one piece at a time.
Yeah. Nice. And then I can see how you said that writing your piece to music is like your path? Because that also could lead very well into freestyle, which is also a performing style that you do too.
Yeah, freely moving was the first type of movement that I did. You know what I mean? Because I hadn't really done a lot of as an adult at least. So that led me to a lot of the movement patterns that I have for sure. I'd say getting fixated on a movement pattern is an understatement because I spent 6 years writing the piece that I eventually performed at Nationals.
Wow.
I wrote it every day for 6 years to a specific piece of music that was a complex piece of music. And it changed a lot over those 6 years, but I letting it go felt like I was like cue midlife crisis. The second that I was done performing that at Nationals, I was like, but what do I do now?
Mm-hmm.
It's like I've been fixated on this for
6 years.
6 years. I guess I'll write new movement patterns.
No, that's really cool to hear that process as well. And as an artist, I feel like there can be this hardship of when is the piece ready? Like, when is it finished? And the finishing of the art piece or the music piece or whatever it is, it's like that tying of the bow can be hard.
Yeah, I kept performing it at PSO competitions because I wanted to work out the kinks. The first time I performed it, I was in the I wasn't in the artistic division. I was in the, what do you call it, the other one. My brain's just not working. There is
like a
championship. Yeah, they call it championship and dramatic. I'm like that thing that I did for 6 years. I competed it in that category just because that was I didn't care. I just wanted to go in and do it. And then the next year I worked on it. And then the following year I competed again, but I moved it to the next category and I just kept, I think I did it like every other year except COVID. And I got in the way a little bit.
Yeah. And how do you see any correlations between performing vocally, even if it's like a freestyle vocally and a freestyle in pole? Is there any?
Sure. I don't think I've ever thought about it before. Vocal freestyle is interesting because usually I guess the similarity would be the availability of audience, right? So if I'm gonna write a song, which I haven't done in a while, and perform it, it's going to be at some bar somewhere. If I'm going to sing a song that's already written, it's going to be at somebody's wedding because I'm a wedding singer. I sing at people's weddings every weekend. And when I'm singing a song that has already been heard a million times, for example, Valerie is sung by Amy Winehouse, the 50 millionth time I've sung that, I'm like, if I don't change this, I'm going to lose my mind. So I start to make changes and I start to like mess with it. And I'm molding somebody else's backbone, somebody else's piece. Whereas in dance, usually I am working alongside, let's say I'm dancing to Valerie. Let's put it that way, just to make it easy to understand. I'm dancing alongside that piece. So I'm able to freely express myself within the confines that I choose to follow. And the audience for that is larger, but like, I don't know, in pole, like if you want to compete something, that's like the best way to get somebody to see a thing. And I don't really want to compete these days. I just want to play. So it's the availability of audience and who's going to watch it and listen to it and see it, all the things is a big part of it. And then the other part of it is the fact that when I'm doing music, usually it's a little more of me changing what someone else has written versus adding to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. Yeah, it's cool. Thank you. So just like a few more questions for you, if that's okay. So one, how do you like to warm up a room? What is like
the same way that I like to awkwardly warm up my life, which is to make everything into a joke. I just start telling jokes about my commute or jokes about something. Fill awkward silence with awkward jokes. Pretty much it. Yeah.
It makes sense.
That's like the easiest answer I have to get.
Yeah, that's good. What do you enjoy seeing in students? And you did say making them tick, but is there anything else that you really enjoy?
Yeah, I like obviously figuring out how they tick, but I think it's really fun when it's newer students, especially intro students. It's really fun to see them laugh for the first time when they make that mistake that everyone else has made. And they're like, but how did I end up with my legs crossed? Or when they're like, isn't supposed to be that much easier on this side than it is on the other side. But with the other, like the more advanced students, it's like watching them accomplish that thing that I know that they've been working on for a really long time and being excited about it. And just sort of being there for the good days and the bad days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been there for a bad day of mine once too, after, stomach issue.
Oh, right.
When I had been given antibiotics without knowing.
Oh my God.
We survived.
Oh my God.
We both survived.
Oh my God. Oh, yep.
Yeah, it was just an uncomfortable stomach situation.
And like, I knew you well enough to like, I'd be like, this is not the way that Teresa usually behaves. And I just like looked at you and I was like, she needs to be left alone. And like, sometimes I don't know that. And not a mind reader, but I like to figure out people tick. And I was like, Teresa needs space and silence and perhaps a nap. But yeah.
Yeah. I was still able to take things and work on them later though.
Yeah.
So appreciative of the experience. What are you currently interested in learning? And that could be pertaining to anything, movement, music, or beyond.
Interested in or actually willing to put the time and effort into?
Interested. Or what are you learning? If you're reading any cool books or...
I am, so I started learning French, and long story short, I have not recently been learning French. I would like to get back into that. And I used to play bass, and I put a pin in that as well. So those are the two things that usually sit at the back of my mind that I'm always like, I'm going to pick them up. I do a lot of shit. I get fixated on hobbies. I have learned to embroider. I use loop pedals to create sound, to mix sound together.
I love the looping.
They're
I think
so
it's
much
so
fun.
Cool. Yeah. There's an artist, Eileen Ivers, who is a fiddleist, and she does a lot of like looping. She's done Billie Eilish and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I've dabbled in all the things, but reading is the thing that I do every day. And it's funny that you said reading, because I did want to touch on pole community, and specifically there's a book that I was reading that made me think of the pole community and like made my brain sort of explode a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I was getting really is it okay if I
yeah what book?
Okay. It's Simone de Beauvoir, and it's a existentialist feminist piece, which sounds so hoity-toity, and it is. It's funny because I ebb and flow as to which type of thing I'm reading. And I, generally speaking, I'm usually reading things that are like sci-fi fantasy and like low commitment reads, or like, but then I'll read really intense things. And this is one of the very intense ones. It's called The Second Sex. It's just about women being considered other. And about the history of that and the existentialist view of that. And I won't get too far into that, but she talks about how people who are oppressed or looked down upon or treated poorly in society, different groups of people, the Black community, the Jewish community, all women. Yeah. There is a difference in the way that they, how do I phrase it? I read this stuff, but I'm not Simone de Beauvoir. But she talks about how like Jewish people have each other. They have a community. They usually live near each other, or they go to the same services. They interact with each other on a daily, regular basis. Yeah, or have similar struggles. Yeah. Right. But women, there's not historically been, and I mean this is like, this is a very old piece of literature. Okay. So like this is historical statements. There's not like a place where women go and congregate every day. Right. You know what I mean? But pole though. So like hear me out on this, right? I feel like people are always wondering why pole? Like why is pole the thing that we've gravitated towards? There's so many things for us. There's just adult gymnastics. There's there's dance, there's ballroom dance, there's rock climbing. There's so many things that people get into. But the pole community specifically has always been this space where like we all are like, huh, yeah, I guess I really am obsessed with this thing. And we really all are here for different reasons and in different backgrounds. And I think of it when I read this book, I was thinking about this where it's like women haven't had an outlet where they can go and they can feel completely comfortable in themselves, comfortable with their sexuality, just completely safe environment, especially amongst other women. Because as you know, that's not always a safe environment because we're pitted against each other historically as well, right? So like here's a space where like everybody's like leaves their shit at the door, comes in, and then also like everyone's invited, like every gender or lack thereof, every race and ethnicity, every human being, every age, they're just all there. And I think that one of the reasons I think that that is possible is because this was started by women. And we are not by nature creatures that would like to cause other people harm or discomfort. That's all of this is like, there's exceptions to every rule and every gender is included in all the things that I'm saying for sure. I love my people. Gender studies, man. I keep getting like really into the concept of like we haven't had an outlet and here's this thing that everybody can do. And I just like, can you think of anything else that applies to?
I mean, I know that there is a women's swim that is at a recreation center in Williamsburg, and that's going to be, it's like, it's hard because again, you don't separate things by gender now, but it's like that was set by the Jewish community in that neighborhood because the men have their own place to swim. It's definitely, I think this space is just a really cool space because yes, it is. Women are usually in leadership and ownership at these spaces that people are going to. Women often empathize at such a deep level too with allowing anybody to walk through the door and want to express themselves in a way as long as it's respectful. And also being respectful of the history of pole and all the other things that come with it, as well as like the transitions that it's making. Yeah, I think that it's a very beautiful community to be in and also empowering to see when you see a bunch of other people as like entrepreneurs or like really doing their own thing, it is empowering in yourself to do your own thing and like, or start your own business or whatever. Like Brooklyn itself is a huge liberal place where there's a lot of women entrepreneurship, and that has to do with like, again, who you surround yourself with. And
totally. But the entrepreneurship, right? Like that's a singular. Like it's the community aspect is the thing that like my brain is like so focused on, right? Because we're all in the same room on the same day and we are all trying to accomplish the same task. And it has nothing to do with trying to get a man, which is just so great.
Yeah.
And you leave feeling like this is why you go to class, right? Like you might already be fit enough to do your own thing, but if you go to class, like it's a social environment. It's a place you can go when you're having a bad day and you can walk into class and then you can leave class being like, okay, well, I feel better. And also I have brunch on Sunday with so-and-so.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that like having a regular community amongst women, like having a community of women, with everyone else obviously included, but having that is so rare. And especially since it checks so many boxes for so many different boxes. There's athleticism and there's expressing yourself sensually and there's dance and there's music and there's socializing and it's just,
and there's playing with physics in real time. Like this is science, this is physics, this is
gravity schmavity. And I think that like that's why it's such an interesting topic is because I don't think the outside world really gets it because how can they? It's not, you have to be in it you have to see it from the inside to like understand why it's such a wild ride.
I think there was a post that someone had put up maybe last week that was something like, if you're looking for a personality, like a hobby that will give you a personality or like really like on a personality, it's pole. It's going to be
because like there are people that do pole dancing that barely ever leave the floor, and there are people that do pole dancing that barely ever touch the floor. That's wild. That's wild. Like that's such an array of, because it's like it's a dance partner, really.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So you can do any type of dance with it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that ad. I like that book. There's another book that's about connections, and it talks about how your direct connections like are important, but also your like direct friends, their connections are super important too.
Yeah.
So like the ripple effect, and that's why individuals in certain communities are at a disadvantage, because they don't have connections at certain levels. And a lot of times you get positions or jobs because of your connections.
You know, the whole world is,
Yes.
you know, no matter how strong the internet gets in our lives, have you noticed that most things happen by word of mouth?
Right, right.
It's like,
Yeah.
call me old fashioned.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's true. The
Yeah.
connections, our connections with other people are the most important things.
Yeah. All right. So where can your listeners find you or come to your classes? Can you like give some plugs there?
Sure. Spend most of my time in South Brooklyn and Gowanus. I teach at Incredipole and I teach at CrossFit South Brooklyn. I teach hand balancing and flexibility mobility classes at CrossFit South Brooklyn. And I sub lots of things at Incredipole, but I teach mainly either upper level or mid-level pole classes. Currently, I'm teaching a bunch of intro classes because I'm having fun with that. But yeah, and if you ever want to take some voice lessons, you just send me a message. I do voice lessons mostly these days virtually because I actually have students all over the planet right now.
Nice.
Super fun. Yeah, because all the kids that I taught, they like went off to college or like they live in different countries and stuff. It's fun.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
So students in different countries with different dialects and stuff, do you hear the difference in their voices when they move, or like
When they sing, you mean?
either when they're singing or yeah, I mean, I wonder if that plays into the song, the singing, or yeah, just vocal projection, because I did hear that there were studies done when babies in different parts of the world cry differently because they've heard different sounds in like
that's cool.
An embryo, you know, it's like it's just interesting to know that could be a thing in crying. And then yeah, I wasn't sure if it came out.
I don't know much about that specifically, but I completely sort of to the side, I can say that like obviously people's accents and stuff come out in their singing, and a really easy example of that is Adele, because her vowels are shaped differently, so her rhymes are written differently.
Right. Okay.
So when she rhymes one word with another, especially growing up with Adele as a songwriting influence, and being the person that records phrases with my ears and then listens back to them later, I became very able to rhyme weird things together, like they make weird rhymes, or not even weird, but maybe not super standard rhyme schemes.
Cool.
Because of the accent just changes. Yeah, vowel shapes are like a big part of singing.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing to think about with movement. I'll have to do more thought on that. But.
Yeah. And one last thing. So if you had one message for all the listeners on something that you're finding important at this moment in your life or your day.
Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, you.
Fuck it. Just wake up in the morning and say, fuck it. Go to pole, and before you start dancing, fuck it. And then when you go to learn a new skill, whatever that is, fuck it. You're there. Do the thing. Done. Mantra for 2025.
Love it. Thank you so much. And we'll include all of your information in the bio.
Yeah. Cool.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having me.